Brilliant stuff. And of course, here we've been talking about the disconnect between the figures and reality. Our guests, Dr. Smart Sapong and Mr. Joe Jackson, have been leading us through their thoughts on how, what explains the disconnect. So far, the fingers have pointed clearly at the banking sector and the upheaval that happened there this year. But let's wrap up our thoughts on that part of the conversation. I want to come back to you, Dr. Sapong. And in your view, what ultimately is responsible for that massive disconnect between the theory and practice of our economy?
Yeah, thank you once again. And I would talk about financial, fiscal mismanagement, poor fiscal mismanagement, in addition to the banking that has been said earlier. What happens usually is that we plan our budget quarterly through to the last quarter. But in practice, in reality, most of allocations meant for quarter one, quarter two usually are mixed. So you hear they say the Assembly Common Fund has not been released, this one has not been that, this one has not been that. And it is becoming quite chronic. We need to change as a country. We need to respect our budget lines and release funds quarterly as stipulated. Then we bulk all to, let's say, the last 2 quarters or the last quarter usually. And it goes into wasteful expenditure. Every department usually wants to finish its budget line, else the monies are returned. Yeah. And that is where a lot of deficits are created in the system. Now, talk about oversight, poor oversight. You know, Parliament would usually do its bit by reviewing the budget critically, debating it, and then sometimes some allocations are slashed if they see you don't actually need that much. Sometimes too they add on to some of the estimates. When Parliament is done with its work, we have the audit service that must follow through the implementation stage of the budget and then report back to Parliament. Now, what happens? How come the reality is different from the figures? Is it, and we don't have audit reports to support same? You see, so I really want to urge the audit service to up its game. We really, one day, Kojo, Ghana must be owned. Ghana must be owned. The issue of cronyism would have to be done away with one day. And I want to encourage the current Auditor General to keep the work he is doing. I can see he's a very tough person. We are all backing him. He should do Ghana's job and make sure we see the true picture. A lot of the woes we have suffered as a country has been a matter of who oversees the implementation stage of the budget.
But we all see how a person trying to do an honest job can meet frustrations.
Of course.
Any example that you gave today of someone doing a good job has also met serious resistance. John Peter Amewu was praised for his work at the Ministry of Lands and Natural Resources. He faced opposition. Martin Amidu was praised for taking up the mantle of Office of Special Prosecutor. He is being strangled in terms of funds. Dominic Domilovo, who is the man we are talking about, is facing opposition from no less than his own board. You know, so at a certain point, does it become clear that it is in someone's interest for nobody to do a good job?
It's not entirely the case, even though the reality is that sometimes.
But every example,
yes. So my advice would be that if you are very sure you are doing the right thing, be assured that the larger Ghana is with you. The larger Ghana is with you. The days where we encourage the few to dictate the pace for larger Ghana is over. Now, we are 2 years into this new government's administration. They made us believe, and I tend to believe because that is the information we have, they made us believe that there are a lot of backlog in terms of the country's finances, and that it made their initial stage of governance quite difficult. And that is quite true. In the Asempa budget, for instance, we were told of some debt management strategies that are going to be used, some arrears that are going to be settled and all those things. Now, this second year, we were told, oh, economic fundamentals are being stabilized. As to whether it has been stabilized, we are yet to be told that yes, they were able to do it. The figures doesn't point to that, and we discussed that earlier. Now, going into the next budget, Kojo, going into the next budget, we really want to see less talk on the woes of the previous government. Personally, it's been 2 years. Whatever it is, let's assume the first 2 years was used to settle the dust. Going into the future, I plead. Else, next year, God willing, we'll be sitting here talking about it, and trust me, I'll be extremely disappointed if we see the picture still the way it is, and the excuses still pointing to what most Ghanaians didn't want, hence voted against. And we shouldn't be told. We shouldn't be told this was it, that was it, this was it. No, those days are over. And going into the coming year, I know I have your support. We would launch an agenda of strict budget monitoring and performance reporting, and we would report. Statutorily, they are supposed to give us reviews quarterly. That even do you know that even the pre-budget formulation stage, we should be briefed on it before this budget is brought to.
That's what happens elsewhere, and that is actually what our procedures suggest.
Yes.
That there should be some consultation.
Yes.
In the preparation of budgets.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Then we have the citizens' budget, where they should clearly cut out, this is what we want to do by this time, this is what to do by this time, we have allocated this amount of money. All these documents would have enhanced the monitoring process, but we barely see anything like that.
Yeah.
The media reviews, performance indicators, and then most importantly, at the end of the year, we should be told that yes, these were our estimates, these are the actuals, and that if there are any deficits whatsoever, it is here, you can trace and found. These were the reasons why. Jackson was saying earlier that revenues performed badly. Should we admit that as lack of estimation capacity, we couldn't estimate well, or we slept on the job?
Right. Important question. I think it's a profound place for us to end that particular part of the conversation. Yeah. I know that you'll have to leave us soon, Dr. Smart Sapong, but we want to thank you for your time with
Absolutely.
us. Dr. Sapong is a Senior Research Fellow at the Institute of Research, Innovation and Development, IRID, at Massive Technical University. Thank you so much for your time.
Absolutely.
Mr. Jackson, we have a bit more time with you. And you know, this whole thing about the disconnect, I like how Dr. Sapong has pointed to the role of the auditor in all of this. They're the ones who have to report the reality. After the budget is read throughout the year, they are supposed to tell us how every institution is performing. But sadly, we've had some evidence that they are not up to it. But is that the only reason why the figures don't match the reality?
I will tell you, no. There's another important reason. And today we've talked about the financial sector, we've talked about the audit and the monitoring process. I will throw in a third factor, corruption. Now, corruption is interesting because we can see it, we can smell it, we can hear it. We even speak about it, but we don't admit it. And the specter of corruption is growing, and everybody, we feel it, but nobody admits it. What corruption does is that even though at the top there will be all the nice macroeconomic figures, corruption acts as a sieve, as a filter, and filters this away so that it is not felt at the bottom. And the more corrupt things are, the less the people at the bottom feel the goodness in their pockets, in their meals, in their leisure, in their salaries, and etc. What truly happens is this: corrupt money typically will even get siphoned out of the country. Corrupt money is not spent in ways in which it affects everybody well. It only goes to a certain coterie of people, a certain group. So it doesn't spread out in this economy. So I will tell you that if that disconnect is supposed to go away, then we must take our fight against corruption seriously.
How do you think the government has done in the fight against corruption for 2018?
Well, the only thing I can point to is that the signature program to fight corruption was a special prosecutor. And the special prosecutor is screaming and shouting that he is under-resourced. For so long as he is under-resourced, that tells me that we've appointed him, but we have not done all there is to do to make sure he does his work well. We know how much Honorable Amedu has even spent his own money at the cost of his own standard of living. I have anecdotal stories that this man will go and file fees for court cases for this country, and he will run out of electricity and cannot pay. Prepaid for his house. And yet he's screaming and shouting, this is huge, I need more resources. If we want that trickle-down effect, fix corruption. If you want that trickle-down effect, make corruption, the punitive measures against corruption, even stronger.
Forgive me, Mr. Jackson, I'm told we have to take a quick break, but we're still live from Parliament. We're going to be right back after these important messages. Right, I think we are there.